Well, hello there. Thanks for joining me. I am Dr. Jen, and this is My Life as a Landlord, episode 200. Hello. I'm so pleased you've joined me for today's show. This is my first show that is doing a location-specific episode outside of North America. Up until now, I've done all Canadian and American locations in the US anyway. And today I am making the jump over to Australia, specifically the state of Queensland. And so, yeah, this is going to be the same as all of my other location-specific podcasts. This is what I do is I take a look at the tenancy laws for that location. This is no different. And I do that in efforts to answer four simple questions. What are the basics of that location? What are the nuances of that location? What about items that a tenant might leave behind in an abandonment situation? And then where to get help in the local area, in this case, Queensland, Australia. And then at the very end of the episode, I go through the rest of what I call my bingo card and I see what did we not answer? What do we need to jump back into and see, did we not actually get to? So we'll see what it is. Yeah, that's how I do my location specific episodes. But I got to tell you, as good as I try to be and as much as I try to review, I may or may not get it all, especially with a location as big as Queensland, Australia. You've got to do your own research. Even if I get this 100% right, 5 minutes after recording, laws can and will change. So you've got to keep current and you've got to make sure that everything for your specific rental is up to speed for you. There may be other requirements that we're not going to talk about here, but you've got to do your own research. But this is designed to get you started. I'm going to give a shout out to today's sponsor, Aloha Capital Investments, LLC. If you want to know more about real estate investing, check out alohajv.com. And I am going to start screen sharing on that note. So if you're watching at My Life as a Landlord on YouTube, you're going to see exactly what I am going through here. And so I've got 7 hyperlinks in the show notes for you today about all about Queensland, Australia. And so I've got the first one up on the screen, and this is called the Residential Tenancies and Rooming Accommodation Act of 2008, but it says current as August 1st, 2025. It's 500 pages. Holy guacamole. We're not going to go through all 500 pages. The first thing in the table of contents is short title, which is pretty funny. Anyway, and it starts on page 31. So there is a lot of definitions in here. This seems super technical. References, boarding and lodgers. This looks like it's a lot about how this act applies to different people in different situations. Yeah, parks, corporate bylaws. So in Australia, if you, like my Canadian friends, if you set something up that is strata, you would use that word strata. In the States, you'd use the word condominiumize, right? You create a condo. And so it's different improvements that are governed by one body. In Australia, it's called corporate body and not a strata or an HOA or condominium, right? So that's we're going to talk about that and how that all works. But and the nomenclature is really different. We traveled to Australia earlier this year, and I did do a few episodes down there. So if you missed it, go back in the library and take a look. Boy, there is a lot of in this a lot of things in this table of contents. My goodness, the table of contents is like 20 pages long. No wonder this is 500 pages long. Okay. Oh, wow. Goes all the way in here. Domestic violence, termination of the lease by tenant. Okay. Wow. Now remember, I have to always chuckle when I look at this kind of stuff. If you're not aware, Australia got started because Europe wanted to basically take all of their mischief people in their prisons, and they took them all to Australia. And so there is a lot of rules down here because you had a lot of colorful characters down here, I suspect. I suspect that's why. Okay, wow, I'm just going page by page by page down here. I'm not even reading them anymore. Okay, so there's a dictionary. And yeah, the first page is on page 31 because of the sheer volume of things that are there. Okay, so instead of going through all of this like this, there are actually other resources that make this more condensed. So this is in here, and if we need to jump back to it, we will, but I'm going to jump to the next hyperlink. So this one is Queensland Tenancy Laws. This is the Queensland Government Residential Tenancies Authority. And so their website is www.rta.qld.gov.au. And so that is normal. QLD is the, you know, how we would have like Hawaii is HI or, you know, British Columbia is BC. Queensland does QLD. So that's their abbreviation. And so this is going through the Queensland tenancy laws. It's got a hyperlink to the act there. And this is, they summarize it. This is actually pretty good. And then they have they have one video. Is this a video? I don't think it is. Anyway, let me keep going back in here. So let's just summarize this. So it says the act states the rights and responsibility of tenants and property managers and owners, what tenants and property manager owners can and cannot do, how to address issues that may arise during tenancy, and what happens if the tenant, property manager, or owner breaks the law. And then it talks about the application of the act. It applies when tenants are renting a house, unit, or caravan. A caravan is the Australian word for RV. Okay, so caravan, renting, basically they're renting a dwelling of some kind where someone lives from a property manager or owner, or a tenant is renting a room from a rooming accommodation manager. And it does not apply for other ones. I'm not going to go into it too much. Information for you before, let's just click on this. Before renting, choosing a rental property, preparing for tenancy, tenancy agreements, general tenancy form. Oh, I like this. I like that they have pre-made forms. If you watched any of my other location specific ones. So it has, oh, there's lots of information in here, but it says general tenancy form, form 18A. I'm going to download that just because I'm curious. Beautiful. And it is even pre-filled for you. All you got to do is type it in and then print it. Tenancy information, the tenants, leaseor's agent, notices may be given to whomever, address of the rental premises, inclusions, current repair orders, things that need, and then is it a fixed term agreement or periodic agreement? Meaning, is it like for 1 year or month to month? When is it starting? Rent must be paid on typically the first of each month. Methods of payment, method 1, method 2. I actually have 3 methods, and then they can give you detail. Oh, this is interesting. There actually is a third method here because it says details for direct credit. Australia is way ahead when they're talking about electronic banking. They do not do checks down there at all. Like the fact that I was telling people that we were paying for vendors at Paradise Ridge and even the RV park up in Canada, paying them by checks, and they were like, you're writing a check, you're mailing a check. Like, oh my gosh. Australia, they do not do that. They literally e-transfer or Venmo in the States. And so the information for doing that in Australia is directly on the lease. That's actually cool. Pace of rent payment, where that has to be paid, date of last rent increase, rental bond amount. So that's their word for security deposit, right? And that's other locations in the US use that word bond as well, but rental security deposit. And then services supplied, who pays for utilities and water. Water is a huge deal in Australia. So it says, is the tenant to pay for water supplied to the premises, yes or no? That's a big deal for water. And then whether things are individually metered for that unit or not. That's important. How services have to be paid for. So this is avoiding so many awkward conversations that I wish this is fantastic. And it's a huge long document. We're only on page 3 of 12. Are there any body corporate bylaws applicable to the occupation of the premises of the tenant? Meaning, is this a part of a bigger strata or an HOA, a corporate body? And it could be yes or no. And if there are, then it's other things. You know what an HOA is. It could be your lawn has to be mowed properly, your decorations have to be proper, your fences have to be proper. It's very specific on what you can and cannot do. And of course, has the tenant been given a copy of the relevant bylaws of that corporate body? Body corporate. Okay. And then they have, they even do repairs. It says name and telephone number of the leaseor's nominated repairer for each of the following: electric, plumbing, and other repairs. And then their phone number. fantastic. Oh my goodness. Are the nominated repairs the first tenant's point of contact for notifying the need for emergency repairs? So basically, it's directing the tenant. If you want a repair done, if there's an emergency repair, do they go to your agent first or to you first? Or do you want them to go directly to the repair guys? Pets, here we go. Type a number of pets approved by the leaseholder to keep at the premises. Type number. So dogs, number, cats, number, or rabbits, or whatever you're allowing. And then, oh, this is the explanation of these items. Entry condition report, where and when rent must be paid, increasing in the rental bond. So you can match the amount of the security deposit as rents go up. Some places you don't do that. So there's a lot of information about water charges, a lot of charges. And yeah, water consumption charge. Wow, this is really incredible. And it's different, right? It's totally different than what we've done, which is kind of cool. Some of them are the same, vacant possession, quiet enjoyment. Those are kind of standard, plain Jane across the board. You're providing dwelling. Um, no more than the number of persons stated in item 16 may reside at the premises. What was item 16? Oh, up here, let's see. Item 16, number of persons allowed to reside at the premises. Oh, there it is. So how do you put that number in? Typically, I do the number of bedrooms times two. But if you've only got a one bedroom, then you could potentially go to three, right? And it's the number of, this is the number of persons, but you got to be careful because you've also got to include pets and wear and tear. So the occupancy issue is kind of a big deal, but that's in there as well. And you'll see if you're into other location specific episodes, sometimes the Fire Code, Fire Prevention Act, sometimes the safety aspect of the dwelling. You don't want 14 people in a two bedroom, right? Or 14 heartbeats in a two bedroom even. You don't want to do that. Okay, it keeps going. I'm still looking just at the lease. This is actually really cool. In fact, I'm going to put the lease directly into the show notes because this is super interesting. Okay, there's that. Okay, notice of damage. And at some point, you're going to, so exit condition report. So these are all talking about things that you've got to do. Did they do an entry report when ending agreement? Because, oh, pets, here we go. Keeping pets and other animals at the premises. You've got to be mindful of what you're doing. Tenant is responsible for pets and other animals. Request for approval to keep a pet. Yeah. This whole page is nothing but pets. Very cool. All right. Exit condition report, condition, leaseor's agent. Okay. And then special terms goes in the back, and then leaseor agent signature of tenant 1, 2, and 3. That's interesting that they use 3 of them. And it doesn't say how much, like the security deposit, or in this case, they call it a bond. They don't say how much it's going to be. That is fascinating. I love when they make it easy and you don't have to guess. So let's talk about this. This is rental bond. Let's go into here. Rental bond, bulk bond, lodgement, web service now available. How much bond can be taken? Here it is. So 4 weeks rent for general tenancies, 2 weeks rent for movable dwellings, meaning either a tiny home or something on wheels, and 3 weeks rent for movable dwellings if electricity is provided. This is so interesting because it's completely different than what we've done before. Okay, so the way that their rental bond works, their security deposit. Rental bond is a security deposit paid at the start of the tenancy. If the property manager owner takes a bond, which they should, they must give the tenant a receipt and lodge it with the residential tenancy, is it Act? Residential tenancy, the RTA, within 10 days. So basically you have to declare it and saying, yes, you've got this money. Because remember, you're lodging it as a liability to you and it's the tenant's money. So you've got to actually declare that you have it. Lodging your bond with the RTA. Rental bond is lodged with RTA web services or by post using a bond lodgement form. I'm just going to look at what the bond lodgement form looks like. It's probably Um, or you can even do it online. Okay. But let's see what the download looks like. So it says a new bond, address of the rental property, agreement starts, agreement ends, number of bedrooms, and then type of dwelling, whether it's a flat or a unit. So like a cottage, a house, townhouse, granny flat. There it is, granny flat. They call that the cottage. I love that they call it a granny flat. Movable dwelling or a site, like an RV pad, movable dwelling site with electricity supplied and individually metered. This is very important because that will impact how much of your bond, or rooming accommodation, meaning a shared accommodation of some kind. Type of management, who is operating this, whether it's the owner, property manager, social housing organization, or rooming accommodation, and then who the owner is, property management owner, and then the payment method, and then the bond lodgement, how much it is, what you're actually doing, when was the rent increase last for this premises, and okay, are they exempt? Okay. And then it talks about the tenants, about who's actually there, who's paid bond money. And then it's got to be paid. You actually remit this money to the RTA. Oh, Residential Tenancies Authority. Forgive me, Residential Tenancies Authority, and how you do it. So it's either online, check or money order, or BPay, which I think is like their equivalent of Venmo. And again, you've got your maximum bond up to 4 weeks, residential tenancy, rooming accommodations up to 4 weeks, and then movable dwellings. If you're supplying electricity, it's 3 weeks. If you're not, then it's 2 weeks. And then rent increase. You can find the date of the last increase on the general tenancy agreement from your property manager, owner, or provider. It's on the lease because they say specifically when was the last time of your rent increase. And then you can't increase the rent payable more than 12 basically once a year after the last rent increase or the initial start. Rent increase requirements do not apply to exempt property owners. Okay. Property is being rented for the first time. The date of the last increase is the date the property is first rented. Um, cool. So that's how you would lodge the bond. That's kind of interesting. Okay. Bond refund. This is important as well. So let's go back to bond refund. And they actually have a YouTube in here. I'm not going to play the YouTube, but bond refund is let's see, lodging. So that is the lodgement formed. Let's go to bond refund page. Let's just go. Let's just see how this works. Okay, so the refund of the rental bond is stating, hey, this is over. And then what's the bond number? You can also do this online. Address of it. Notice the ending of the tenancy has expired. Notice was not issued and the tenants have vacated. So if they've actually vacated and the bond was decreased, new weekly rent, which doesn't seem like it would make sense, but maybe it does. And then who receives the tenant bond, the refund of the rental bond? And then who's the property manager? And then what was the reason for the tenancy ending? Holy man, look at all these reasons. Mutual agreement, notice the intention to leave without grounds, end of a fixed term agreement. So there you go. So fixed term leases end abruptly. They do not automatically convert. Unremedied breach, meaning rent is in arrears, non-payment of rent. Unremedied breach general, meaning there's a material term of the lease. Property has become unlivable. Property was abandoned. Property is being sold. That's different. Owner's intention to sell. Property requires specific significant repairs and renovations, planned demolition, death of a co-tenant, death of the sole tenant. That is the first time I've seen that in a long time, and it's reality, right? Due to condition of the property, I'm still going through the reasons why this bond would be refunded and why the tenancy is ending. For owner occupation, non-compliance with tribunal order, failure to comply with repair order, mortgagee in possession of the property, meaning it's been foreclosed on, end of entitlement to student accommodation, change in use, property required for state government program, property is being compulsorily acquired, end of entitlement to occupy under employment, end of housing accommodation assistance, serious breach, only applicable if leaseor, state or community housing provider. Okay, so this is talking about fast refunds, other refunds, maximum bond about, we talked about that. Okay, claim on bond. When a residential manager, property manager owner claims or disputes the bond refund request, they must provide supporting evidence to the tenant or the resident. It must be done within 14 days of the bond claim or dispute. And evidence must be provided back to the tenant slash resident, not to the residential tenancy authority. Basically, you've got to go for this. Um, tenant can claim, okay. So it looks like the tenant can actually claim excess bond amounts from residential tenancy authority using excess bond refund for the tenants, which requires all bond contributors. Oh, let's look at that. What is that all about? Excess bond refund from tenants. They may use this form to request a refund in excess bond monies held by the RTA that exceed maximum bond amount. So the maximum amount stated in the act apply to all bonds, no matter what they're called, including a pet bond, pet deposit, or how many bonds are taken. It's important to note that there are different bonds. Claiming excess bond. If a tenancy agreement was renewed after 30 September 2024, tenants may request refund for any excess bond monies that exceed the max. Oh, so if they've actually overpaid when this changed, that's what it is. Okay, so this is how they would request that money back if they've overpaid, because then the rules changed. Okay, I'll buy that for $1. That's pretty cool. Okay, let's look at the entry condition report, exit condition report. These are your condition inspections. And they've got a different one. They've got one for general tenancies, units, houses, houseboats at the start of a tenancy. And then they've got a movable dwelling one, caravan, caravan site, mobile home at the start. And then there's one for a room. So there's actually 3 different ones. I wonder why they're all different. Okay, so entry condition report, general tenancies. Are the premises individually metered? Water meter, I'm telling you, water is like gold there. You do not want to mess up water. So is the premises water efficient? This is really interesting. So it tells you exactly how to do it. Comments on this, entry general, and so you're just talking about the state of the unit itself, because remember, this one is for units, houses, or houseboats, and then everyone signs. But let's go back. Let's look at one of the other ones. How is the caravan one different? Okay, movable dwelling site. So stovetop griller, hot water system, interior waters. So this one is different. They don't talk about water, but they talk about electricity and gas reading. Oh, they do talk about water. What's the water reading? Are the premises individually metered? Okay. Driveway, concrete path. So this one is much shorter. And then there's a room one. Let's look at the room one. I've never seen one that's different entry room, entry checklists for homes, movable homes, and rooms. And so this one's only 2 pages. The first one is the only one that you use. The second one is instructions. And so, okay, it's just talking about what is included and the condition of what is included and how many. Clean, working, undamaged. Okay, smoke alarms. This is good. It's kind of cool. That's different. And making sure. So tenant, oh, it's saying tenants must complete the report. Okay, and then they actually have a YouTube video in this as well. That's good. Okay, some of this, vacating a property. One of the things that we're going to look at, in fact, I'm going to look at my bingo card here. So let's look at paying rent and grace periods and late fees. Let's see if we can find that. In fact, I'm going to jump back to the first one. And no, I'm not going to jump back to the first one. It's too much. Before renting, preparing for a tenancy, during a tenancy. Here it is. Entry to the property. I suspect they're going to have entry notice. Yep, entry notice for proper notice. Oh, and they've got a little chart here. That's good. And to inspect the property, you're allowed to inspect the property every 3 months, but you have to give 7 days notice. That's a lot. 7 days notice of entry. Okay. But everything else, this is just for inspection. Um, but everything else, it's 48 hours, as you can see. So repairs, follow-up inspection to show a property, and then entry time. So it does give you specific access rules for landlords. And so it's 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. Monday to Saturday. You can't do it on a Sunday, according to this. And entry notice is not required. Typically, this makes sense. In an emergency, when they believe it's necessary to protect property, tenant verbally agrees with the entry and to carry out site maintenance, caravan park. Yeah. And then notice to leave, notice of intention to leave. Okay, renting with pets. Let's talk about that. I still want to go through grace period and late payments, so don't think that I forgot about that. I haven't. Okay, so you've got, oh, here, this is cool. So we talk about defining a pet and requesting to keep a pet. I think this is in the lease that we just talked about, which is fine. House rules in a rooming situation. Okay, I'm going to leave that. Okay, fact sheet and then a flow chart. Okay. Renting with pets fact sheet. Renting with pets overview. What is a pet? I'm a tenant. I'd like to keep my pet during the tenancy at my rental property. Yeah. And local council laws may limit the number and types of animals that can be kept at the property. That's important, especially if you're watching this as a landlord and you've got properties in Queensland, you've got to know your local laws on what how many animals can be on the property and then what to do. Who's responsible for the nuisance caused by the pet? If you've got any questions or anything, the Residential Tenancy Authority is right here. They've got all these goodness, and they're all over social media as well. And they've got their own podcast. That's phenomenal. Cool. All right, let's go flow chart. I think this is the flow chart. Oh my goodness. All right, so there is a flow chart. I'm not going to go through that. That's sort of in micro print. We're going to keep going. Inclusion routine inspections, break-ins, winter safety check, repair, rent, and other bills. Let's go to rent. Let's go back and see if there's a grace period. Property managers and owners must offer tenants and residents at least two options to pay the rent. One options must not exceed reasonable transaction costs, which is basically cost in addition to standard bank transaction fees, and must be reasonably accessible to the tenant and resident. So for us, both in Canada and in the US, we offer the option, walk into the bank and put the money into the account. That's about as accessible as we can get. There are other electronic means as well, but rent increases, non-payment of rent. If a tenant does not pay all the rent on the date is due the following day, they are 1 day in arrears. The property manager owner cannot issue a breach of notice until the tenant has been arrears for a certain number of days. And this number varies depending on the type of tenancy agreement. Okay, so then there's a drop down. So it looks like notice to leave, 7 days to move out. So they basically split. So if you've got like a unit, either an apartment or a house, and then you've got your movable one and your rooming, there's different ones based on which type of unit. This is really intricate. No wonder that the act is 500 pages. Unpaid rent procedures. Okay, I'm gonna actually increase this because I want to see it. Okay, so I've zoomed in on this. Unpaid rent procedure. This is general tenancy. So this is a not a caravan, not a roommate situation. So if rent is paid up to up to 7 days, 7 days, 5 days in a caravan park, but 7 days, discuss the problem with the tenant, give the tenant notice to remedy on the 8th day. Tenant has 7 additional days to pay the unpaid rent. If rent is still not paid, decide if you want to end the tenancy. End the tenancy, but it doesn't talk about late fees. Then it goes into rent increases, excessive rent increases, no periodic agreements, rent increase, fixed term, new agreements. Okay, so this is there is then it talks about other bills. The tenant may be charged for water if it's individually metered. Tenant may have to pay for electricity or gas, and then there is a number of payment options for properties with solar power. So it seems way more updated than what we have in US and Canada. And tenant pays for contents insurance if required for their possession. So this is renter's insurance, and it says if required, and so it's optional, it appears. And then partial billing. Okay, I still haven't seen anything regarding a late fee amount. Okay, forms and resources. Let's go there. And ongoing rental law changes, personal information. Okay, application process. So this is one thing that I noticed all over the place when I was putting this episode together. Collection of personal information, especially when someone is applying for your rental in Queensland, they're talking about the application and how much you can request and what someone has to give you, and then that's it. So here's what it is. Personal information can only be collected if it is relevant to the application process or managing the premises. This includes photographs taken during property inspections. Personal information does not be used for any other purpose without the tenant's or prospective tenant's consent. So the application process just got more detailed with this last revision for the act. And so it looks like this. A property manager owner can request no more than 2 documents from each following categories to support the tenancy application. Documents proving the prospective tenant's identity, no more than 2. Documents showing the prospective tenant's financial ability to pay rent, and documents assessing the prospective tenant's suitability for the rental. And I think that's pretty standard. That's on point. So you can 2 items for identity. So like either a government ID, birth certificate, something that proves that they are who they say they are. Prospective tenant's financial ability to pay the rent. So bank statements or pay stubs, and documents assessing the prospective tenant's suitability for the rental, basically like letters of reference from other landlords or character reference, things like that. There are restrictions on what information and supporting documents can be requested by a property manager during the rental application process. For more information, read the application process webpage. And it is a offense to request personal information from prospective tenants outside what is prescribed by the Act. The maximum penalty for noncompliance is 20 penalty units. I'm sorry, what is a penalty unit? Okay, let's go to the application process webpage because now I'm intrigued. Okay, so 20 penalty units. Okay, I'm just going to straight up ask, what is a penalty unit in Queensland? What is that? A penalty unit, okay, is in Queensland is a standard monetary unit used to calculate fines for various offenses. It's defined by legislation, and the fine for an offense is determined by multiplying the value of 1 penalty unit by the number of units applicable to that offense. As of now, holy man, as of now, 1 penalty unit is 166 US dollars and 90 cents. Holy man. So a penalty unit. So 20 penalty units. All right, let's just do the math here. 20, 20 times, what is it? 166.90. $3,338 US dollars. No, wait a minute. This is Australian dollars. Okay, Australian dollars, not US dollars. Wow, penalty units. So it's 20 penalty units, and right now it's 166.90. And then let's just make this fun. Let's go into a currency converter. Aussie dollars to US dollars. Okay, so if we're doing an Australian dollar is 3338. That's 2,179 dollars and 71 cents. So basically 3,300 US, sorry, 3,300 Australian is 2,200 US. And let's see what that is in Canadian because I know I've got my Canadian listeners. So Canadian dollars and Australian dollars seem to be almost on par. And it's true. So you've got 3,300 Australian dollars is almost $3,054 Canadian. Okay. But this whole idea of penalty units, that's different. I've never seen that before where you have it. Okay. Um, okay. My goodness. Information Privacy Act. This is normal on some of these. Frequently asked questions. I still haven't gotten my late fee. Oh, this is the changes from effect from May 1, 2025. Application, rules of entry. They've defined abusive access and new laws, rental bond process. Boy, they change this often. Wow. Reletting costs. Yeah. Okay. All right. Let's go to the next hyperlink because there's a lot to this. Okay. So this one I went to Tenants Queensland. So this is tenantsqld.org.au, and this is a fact sheet. This is the changes, tenancy law changes, and application process. We've talked about this already on what must be in here, and then the limits of the supporting documents. And let's see, choice of how to submit. Yeah, privacy of renters' information. Entry, minimum notice periods and frequency. Okay, so we've already hit some of these already. Fixtures and structural changes. Let's see, if a tenant requests to change something, lease or a provider must provide a response to a tenant or resident's request within 28 days. Hmm. And then if they say no, why? If body corporate approval is required. So this is if there's an HOA or a strata. If they want to do something major to the structure, which, oh my goodness, that doesn't normally happen in the US. So other changes, tenancy laws in effect, and that goes back to 2024. Okay, so there is some um, information on that, and then they have a fact sheet as well. I'm not going to go into, but that's also a hyperlink here. The next one I've done is AussieRentLaws.com/Queensland, tenants' rights in Queensland, a comprehensive guide. And this one, it's actually really easy to read, especially since you can see the act is super, super detailed. So this one says basically keep everything that you have in writing and keep it. And what your rights are, eviction process, rent increases, filing a dispute, and then it's got a bunch of different hyperlinks to everybody so Tenants Queensland, QCAT. What is QCAT? Queensland Civil and Administrative Tribunal. So this is where you would put in your submission for a dispute. So this looks like, yeah, residential tenancy disputes. Let's just go in here. Residential tenancy disputes on how you would do this. Practice direction. And it walks you through on how to do a dispute, an application for a dispute, for rental applications, rental payment methods. Yeah, all of these are 20 penalty units. All of these. Talks about parties experiencing domestic and family violence, pets and rental properties, non-urgent tenancy disputes versus tenancy disputes. Okay, what's a non-urgent tenancy dispute? You've got to go through dispute resolution first, pets and rental properties. Okay. You basically have to educate yourself in all of this, and that's as a tenant or as a landlord before you can put in a dispute. Tenancy database listings. Interesting. So a tenancy database is a list where landlords or agents record personal information about tenants who have had specific problems with their tenancies. For example, a tenant can be listed in a tenancy database for amounts owing under a tenancy agreement, objectionable behavior, repeated breaches, or domestic or family violence matters. Wow. That is something that everybody asks for in the US and Canada, and they say that is unauthorized. And they don't let you do it. But in Canada, you can. Landlord information, landlord's request to search, landlord's request to list. So you can basically have, this is basically a tenancy blacklist, it looks like to me. National tenancy database. This is very different. Comprehensive tenancy screening made easy. Oh, this is by Equifax. So you're doing a tenant check. Wow. Okay. Well, you can check it all out. This is screening tenants are very different. And this, I guess, is why you can only ask for two forms in each: identity, payments, and landlord history. Hmm. Okay, so renting in Queensland. This is yet another resource I have in the show notes here. Renting in Queensland. We've got the act, the application process, your tenancy agreement, starting a tenancy, during your agreement, what everybody must do, ending your agreement, resolving disputes, who's covered by the act. And then again, it goes into movable dwelling units, social housing tenants, rental bonds, rooming accommodations, and who everybody is. Failure to comply with the act and who's not covered. And if you're not sure, call them and they'll tell you if you're covered by the act. Okay, so now we're getting into abandoned property. So I've actually got these hyperlinks. Yeah, I've got two more hyperlinks specifically about abandoned property. And we've already seen that most entry notices are 48 hours. Unless you're going to do a quarterly inspection, then it's 7 days to enter. But for abandoned property and goods, the property manager owner must have reasonable grounds to believe that the property has been abandoned. And this could include that the rent has not been paid, buildup of mail or newspapers in the mailbox, observation of neighbors or others that suggest the tenants have left the property, or nobody's come and gone at all. That's typically how you'll find out. Absence of household goods, meaning it looks like they did a midnight run and there's nothing left in the house. Utilities, including gas, telephone, electricity, have been disconnected, or the tenant does not respond to attempts to contact them. And you can either put in an entry notice, a Form 9, to confirm that the property has been abandoned, or an abandonment termination notice. Okay, this is interesting that it says it's been abandonment termination notice. So it looks like you probably have to put in a Form 9 to say, yes, I'm going to go in. Address of the rental property that's notice, who's putting this in, notice issued to the tenants, the day it is, and then if the tenant does not dispute within 7 days, and then the signature of the property owner. And then, yeah, refund of rental bond for because of course you still have their money, and you can put in a refund of rental bond, but you've got to wait until the proper day to do that, and so that the tenant hasn't disputed it. Okay. Let's see, abandoned property and goods. Let's go back to that and say, what do you actually do when you say, yes, it has been abandoned, the tenant has not, let's say they have not disputed it. Now what? Goods and documents left behind after a tenant resident has moved out must be returned or disposed of according to specific rules. Goods and documents left behind page for more information, and then valuing the goods. Goods should have a value to determine their worth, and an item that may appear to be junk may actually be valuable. Goods worth a prescribed value or more must be handled in accordance with the act. And if the property manager intends to dispose of or sell the goods left behind, a record of the items should be kept, an itemized list, photos, etc., in case of future dispute over the items. That's typical that it goes one way or another. Either it's super detailed and inventoried with value, and then you've got to hold it for some time, or it's just deemed abandoned at the time. And it looks like Queensland is the first one where you've got to assess the value of the goods left behind. And yeah, so personal documents, birth certificates, original photographs, and money must be given to the tenant. And if the tenant cannot be contacted for whatever reason, the personal documents must be given to the office of the public trustee within 7 days of the end of tenancy. The public trustee does not take passports, Medicare cards, driver's license, bank cards. This must be remain with the issuer, meaning Medicare cards should be returned to Department of Human Services. Wow, there's going to be a lot of work if you've got people who've abandoned this. Requirements to contact the owner of goods left behind. You've got to do everything you possibly can to get a hold of them and then value this. Goods should be valued to determine their worth. And the type of tenancy agreement and the total value of goods left behind determines how and when the goods can be stored, sold, or disposed of. So, and again, it's these three different ways depending on what the tenancy is. So if it's with a home or an apartment, general tenancy, movable dwelling tenancy agreements, and then rooming accommodations. So the rules are different depending on what it is. So, and there's usually a threshold of a dollar amount, and that's exactly what it is here. In general tenancy agreements, if the total values of the goods left behind is less than $2,500, the goods can be sold or disposed of straight away if they would be unhealthy or unsafe to be stored, reduce in value if stored, and cost more to remove, store, or sell than they're valued at. If the total goods of value left behind is more than 2,500, meaning cars, furniture, caravans, the goods must be stored for 1 month, after which they must be sold. They can be sold at auction. You must make reasonable effort to contact the owner of the goods and notify them of the auction, which includes contact methods as outlined above. Now, just one note here. Auctions are very common, like super common in Australia. I did not know this until I was down there. And so even a property that's for sale, they'll have an auction in the driveway for that property. So having an auction is like having a garage sale, but you're having an auction in the driveway. So just keep that in mind that when they say it's at auction, this is sort of a normal thing for them. So it wouldn't be like we think of an auction of like an auction house and an auctioneer and blah, 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 and that's not quite how it goes in Australia. So that's what they mean by auction. Okay, let's look at um, this different one. So there are different ways. Rooming accommodation agreements. So for people that have abandoned it, the threshold is $900. 28 days, you got to try to get a hold of the person and store, and then it's $900. And so there's different ones for each type of rental unit. And then I threw in this article. This is Real Estate Institute of Queensland. Now, I actually went to a Real Estate Institute of Queensland meeting when we were there. It was actually really good. I was actually really shocked. This was on Gold Coast earlier in 2025. And so if you're listening to this and you were there, it was really well attended. I was shocked. And we actually really enjoyed ourselves. And so I found this Real Estate Institute of Queensland article about abandoned goods. And it's called Trash or Treasure, Best Practice for Dealing with Abandoned Goods. And it's just a very simple article on how this would work. And anyway, I threw it in. It's got a recent decision on some details. And then the conclusion, when the goods are abandoned at a property, it can understandably be a difficult situation for people to deal with, especially when an incoming tenant is expected, right? You've got to be able to deliver that unit. And so really interesting on how this all works. But anyway, I threw this in. If hopefully it's helpful. Okay, I'm going to go back to the original act when I do the bingo card because we did not get everything and I'm not sure that it's all there. And so that's okay. We're just going to do the best we can, which is normal. Okay, so going through the bingo card, tenant application fee. I didn't see anything about the application process charging a fee. So I'm going to say no. I don't think that that's there, but I'm just scrolling up and looking at this. Let me go back up to application and let's see, transfer to park rules. Okay, this is still, goodness, there's so much to this. And if you're in Queensland and you're new to real estate, you really may want to either get into a meetup or even better, talk to a real estate solicitor that does this for a living. Like this is probably a good idea instead of trying to get through it yourself. Okay, I'm not going to try because it's super detailed. Grace period for late rent without penalty. Yes, we established that depending on the type of whatever is getting rented, 7 days is a grace period for a general tenancy, 5 for a caravan. Late fee amount, never found it, so I don't know. Security deposit method in Australia, they call it a bond, and it depends on what type of tenancy you have or what type of dwelling you have. And so it just depends. So if it's 4 weeks of equivalent rent for a general tenancy, 2 weeks for a caravan without electricity, and it's 3 weeks if electricity is being supplied. But it doesn't say on how the bond, actually, it does say how the bond, you have 7 days to remit it. You've got to declare that bond to the Residential Tenancy Authority, and then you've actually got to turn over the money. And so the landlord completely relinquishes it at all, which is unlike uh, most places in North America. The landlord retains control over it. Lease wording and details, they actually do even better. They have a lease form. Is emergency contact required in the event of tenant abandonment, incapacitation, death, or imprisonment? They do have contact information, but it doesn't appear that it's in the lease. This, of course, is good practice, but I don't think so. But it does say that in the event the tenant or co-tenant dies, that's a reason for uh, ending the tenancy. So, but anyway, is the emergency contact required? The answer is no. Pets and animals, pet deposit, pet rent, and pet bond. The answer is yes, and that is that is in all about the rental bonds. Delivery of the signed lease required. It is required. I did not catch the requirement day, but it is required. Condition inspection at move-in. Yes, that is called the notice of the entry, um, the move-in checklist. And I know that's not what it's called, but we did go through it. And so that is required at move in and move out. Standard warning letters or wording. Yes, basically, there's all kinds of forms that are already pre-done for you. All you have to do is just go through it. Required maintenance inspections. I'm going to say they're not required, but they are already set up for notice of entry for quarterly inspections with 7 days notice. So I'm not sure they're required, but it's a good idea as a landlord to do that. How often can the rent be increased? Again, it's up to different municipalities of what rent increase is about. And then you can only do it once a year, but how much you can do it and how much notice depends on what type of rental you have, what type of dwelling you are renting, what kind of tenancy you have. Renter's insurance is not required. It is optional, and it was mentioned. Abuse of access is defined. We do have specific days and hours that landlords can enter, but only with proper notice and only with proper reasoning. Landlord retaliation is defined. Fixed leases do end abruptly. Condition inspection and move out, yes. Return of bond, yes. The tenant has to make application for the refund of the bond. Can you use the deposit as the security deposit or bond as last month's rent? No, because it is not rent. It is a bond and it is given to the Residential Tenancy Authority. Okay, and then timing of evictions. How long until you get notice of eviction due to non-payment of rent or utilities? Depends on what you're renting, but a general tenancy looks like it's 7 days, and then you give them an additional 14 days. There was actually a whole flow chart, if you remember, on this. So it just depends on, it's different if you're in a caravan, which is an RV, and then abandoned items. We talked a lot about abandoned items, value in inventory. Again, it depends on what type of tenancy you have, the dollar threshold of what you have to do and how long you have to wait. Okay, so in each of my specific location-specific podcasts, they are set up answering the same 4 questions. What are the general items in the location that we're looking at regarding tenancies? What are the nuances of that location? What stands out? Some guidance about abandoned items in that location, and then where can you get help in your local area, in this case, Queensland, Australia. And then I reviewed my bingo card, just going through the standard list of items that I see the most often. But you've got to know that you've got to do your own research in your specific geographic area, especially if you are in one of the larger centers that have, so like Gold Coast, Brisbane, Cairns. If you're in any of those locations, you've got to do your own research. You need to do your own research regardless for yourself, because even if I got this 100% right, laws can and do change. And this actually changes often. It changes very like once a year, if not more. So make sure you are up on the latest things. I gave you a bunch of resources on where you can go to help yourself. And also, this episode is not inclusive. One more time, you've got to do your own research. So if you're listening to this podcast, chances are that you are either curious about real estate in Australia, or you are a landlord in Australia, or about to be a landlord in Australia. So you can do a few things. One, you can actually become very familiar with all these resources, and two, enter the conversation with other Queensland landlords. Make sure you're in the room, either physically in the room in the form of a meetup. There's plenty of meetings that you can go to, or get on social media and get in these virtual conversations with other Queensland landlords. They can help you ask questions, ask what lessons learned, ask about the biggest mistakes you should try to avoid. All of that, make sure that you are having other discussions, because other Queensland landlords want to help you. I hope you enjoyed today's show, my first one that's not about North America. That's pretty interesting. And I've been there myself, and I've been to real estate meetups in Queensland. So this is actually really fun for me. So don't forget to subscribe and enjoy the show on My Life as a Landlord, including expert advice and real stories from across the globe. Today, I'm recording this episode from Maui, Hawaii. And I always ask that. Why? Because real estate takes you places. Where do you want real estate to take you? Maybe to Australia. Join me next week. Join me in the next episode right now, live in the library, which is episode 201 for the U.S. territory known as the Pacific Islands. I will see you there.